Before Lanka burned, before Ravan fell, before Ram's arrows ended the war, one woman had already seen the disaster coming. She was not standing on a battlefield. She was not holding a bow. She did not command an army of Rakshas. But inside the golden palace of Lanka, she understood something that Ravan refused to accept: that power without restraint becomes blindness, that pride without dharma becomes destruction, and that even the strongest king can lose everything when he stops listening to the truth. Her name was Mandodari, the queen of Lanka, the wife of Ravan, and perhaps the most tragic voice of reason in the Ramayana. This is not just the story of a queen, it is the story of a woman who saw a kingdom walking toward fire and tried to stop it, but the king would not listen. Lanka was not an ordinary kingdom. It was a city of gold, a fortress surrounded by the ocean. Its towers rose above the sea, its palaces shone under the sun. Its gates were guarded by warriors feared across the worlds. And at the center of this kingdom sat Ravan, the 10-headed king, a scholar of the Vedas, a mighty warrior, a ruler with unmatched power, wealth, and ambition. Ravan was not a simple villain. That's what makes his fall so powerful. He was brilliant, he was devoted, he was learned. He had performed great tapasya, he had earned powerful boons, he had defeated kings, gods, and warriors. But there was one enemy Ravan could never defeat: his own ego. And beside him, inside the palace of Lanka, stood Mandodari. She was not merely Ravan's wife, she was his queen. She was wise, composed, and deeply aware of dharma. In many traditions, Mandodari is remembered as one of the Panchkanya, 5 great women whose names are invoked with reverence. But despite that reverence, her story is often hidden behind the shadow of Ravan. People remember the king who abducted Sita. They remember the war between Ram and Ravan. They remember Hanuman burning Lanka. They remember the final battle. But Mandodari's tragedy was quieter. She watched everything unfold from inside the palace. She saw the danger before the warriors did. She understood the consequences before the ministers did. And again, she tried to stop Ravan from destroying himself. The turning point came when Ravan abducted Sita. This one act changed the fate of Lanka. Sita was not an ordinary woman. She was the wife of Ram, a woman of purity, strength, and unshakable dignity. When Ravan brought her to Lanka, he thought he had brought home a prize. But Mandodari understood something deeper. He had not brought victory into Lanka, he had brought danger. He had brought the cause of his own destruction. Imagine Mandodari in that palace. The city outside is still glowing, the ocean still protects Lanka, the army still obeys Ravan, the people still fear his name. But Mandodari knows that something has changed. A line has been crossed. This is no longer politics. This is no longer conquest. This is adharma. And adharma, no matter how powerful it looks at first, always carries the seed of its own fall. Mandodari warned Ravan. She told him to return Sita. She reminded him that forcing another man's wife into his palace was not an act of strength. It was an act that would invite ruin. She did not speak as an enemy. She spoke as someone who still wanted to save him. She spoke as a wife, as a queen, as the last voice of reason in a palace full of fear. But Ravan did not listen, because Ravan had power. And power, when mixed with ego, often mistakes warning for weakness. This is what makes Mandodari's story so painful. She was not ignorant, she was not passive, she was not unaware of Ravan's flaws. She knew, she saw, she understood. But she was trapped inside a kingdom where one man's pride had become law. The ministers praised Ravan, the warriors obeyed Ravan, the palace feared Ravan. Even when some knew the truth, they did not speak it with the force it deserved. But Mandodari did. She told him the truth. And the truth is dangerous in the court of an arrogant king. Because arrogant kings do not want truth. They want agreement, they want applause, they want the world to reflect their own desires back to them. Mandodari's wisdom had no army behind it. Her words had no weapons. And in Ravan's court, wisdom without power was easy to ignore. Then Hanuman came to Lanka, a single messenger, a Vanar. At first, Lanka may have laughed. How could one messenger threaten the Golden City? How could one servant of Ram stand against the might of Ravan? But Hanuman was not there to conquer Lanka, he was there to deliver a warning. He found Sita in a Shokavatika. He gave her Ram's message. He allowed himself to be captured. He stood in Ravan's court. And when his tail was set on fire, Lanka made the mistake of thinking it had humiliated him. But that fire became a symbol. Hanuman leapt across the city. Palaces burned. Roofs caught fire. The Golden City trembled under the flames of only one messenger. And Mandodari must have understood the meaning in that moment. If one messenger could do this, what would happen when Ram himself arrived? The burning of Lanka was not the final destruction. It was a preview, a warning, a glimpse of the future. Once again, the signs were clear. Once again, the universe was telling Ravan to stop. Return Sita, choose Dharma, save Lanka. But Ravan's pride was louder than the fire. He did not listen. Then came Vibhishan, Ravan's own brother. Like Mandodari, Vibhishan also warned Ravan. He too asked him to return Sita. He too reminded him that Dharma was not on Lanka's side. But Ravan could not tolerate it. To him, advice felt like betrayal. Wisdom felt like cowardice, and Dharma felt like weakness. So Vibhishan left. He crossed over to Ram, and in that moment, Lanka lost one of the few voices that could still see clearly. Think about Mandodari then. One by one, the voices of reason were disappearing. The palace was becoming louder but less wise. The war drums were rising, the armies were preparing, and Ravan, surrounded by power, was becoming more alone. This is one of the great tragedies of the Ramayana. Ravan had people around him who told him the truth. Mandodari told him, Vibhishan told him, even the destruction caused by Hanuman told him. But Ravan did not fall because nobody warned him. He fell because he refused every warning. The war began. The ocean that had once protected Lanka was crossed. Ram's army arrived. Vanar stood before the Golden City. The impossible had happened. A kingdom that thought itself untouchable was now under siege. And still, Ravan would not return Sita. This is where Mandodari's tragedy becomes almost unbearable. She was the queen of Lanka, but she could not save Lanka. She was Ravan's wife, but she could not save Ravan from himself. She was wise, but wisdom had been locked outside the throne room. As the war continued, Lanka began to lose its greatest warriors. One by one, the pillars of Ravan's strength started falling. Commanders died, sons died, brothers died. The sound of victory in Lanka slowly became the sound of mourning. And Mandodari, who had warned Ravan before all this began, had to watch the cost of his pride arrive at her doorstep. This is the part of the story that often gets lost. War is not only fought by warriors. War is also suffered by those who warned against it. By mothers, by wives, by citizens, by those who saw the destruction coming but had no power to stop it. Mandodari's pain was not only personal, it was civilizational. She was watching the fall of a kingdom that could have survived if only its king had chosen humility before it was too late. And then came the final battle. Ram and Ravan stood against each other. Two kings, two visions of power. Ravan had strength, knowledge, weapons, and pride. Ram had discipline, dharma, patience, and purpose. The battle was fierce. Ravan was not weak. He was still one of the greatest warriors in this epic world. But strength could not protect a man forever when his cause is unjust. At last, Ravan fell. The mighty king of Lanka, who had shaken the worlds, lay defeated. The 10-headed ruler was gone. The throne was empty. The Golden City was broken. And Mandodari came to the battlefield, not as a queen in glory, but as a wife in grief. This is one of the most haunting images in the Ramayana. Mandodari standing before the body of Ravan, the man she had loved, the king she had warned, the husband she could not save. She had seen his greatness, she had seen his flaws, she had seen the brilliance that made him extraordinary, and the arrogance that made him doomed. Her grief was not simple, because Mandodari was not mourning a purely evil man. She was mourning a great man who had destroyed himself. That is a different kind of sorrow, a deeper kind. She knew Ravan had the power to choose differently. He could have returned Sita, he could have listened to Vibhishan, he could have accepted Mandodari's counsel. He could have saved his sons, his people, his kingdom, and himself. But he chose pride, and pride demanded everything. This is why Mandodari's story matters, because she represents a truth that every age understands. Sometimes the wisest person in the room is not the one sitting on the throne. Sometimes the person who has seen the danger most clearly has the least power to stop it. And sometimes kingdoms fall, not because they lacked warriors, but because they ignored the people who told them the truth. Mandodari was surrounded by gold, but she lived inside a tragedy. She had status, but not control. She had wisdom, but not obedience. She had love, but not enough influence to save the man she loved from his own darkness. In the Ramayana, Ram is remembered for dharma. Sita is remembered for purity and strength. Hanuman is remembered for devotion. Ravan is remembered for power and pride. But Mandodari should be remembered for something equally important: the courage to speak truth before destruction becomes inevitable. She was not the cause of Lanka's fall, she was the warning before it, and that warning was ignored. In the end, Lanka did not burn because Mandodari was silent. She was not silent. Lanka did not fall because wisdom was absent. Wisdom was present. Lanka fell because Ravan heard the truth and chose his pride instead. That is the tragedy of Mandodari, the queen who warned Ravan, the woman who saw Lanka burn before it happened, and the forgotten voice of reason inside one of the greatest epics ever told. Some people are forgotten because they did nothing. Mandodari was forgotten even though she tried to stop everything. And perhaps that is why her story deserves to be remembered. This was Forgotten Indian Epics, Ancient Stories, Forgotten Voices, Eternal Lessons. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story soon. Until then, namaskar.